The following is a final appendix to the easternmost colonial history of the nation of the United States and of North America as a whole. De Tocqueville was generally correct, in my view, when he surmised in his notes and later book, Democracy in America, that early settler Americans were especially wedded to two fundamental promises of their endeavors, money and profit, and by future blessing from, quote, Jesus Christ. The Revolutionary War ended with a recognition of 13 colonies as initial states of the new Union. Among the regions, New England's settlements had figured prominently as drivers of the essential legal and financial underpinning of what was at first a fragile empire in the making. After the war, the English and French, and at least some of the immediate Native American diaspora, had been quieted. There was more room to expand, and ambitions of members of the Continental Army returning to their homes made it impossible for the new government to contain the settler population within boundaries set by old and even some newer treaties and promises. The Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights and Constitution suited especially the people of New England and Atlantic coastal settlements. However, the frontier over the Alleghenies and across the Mississippi still awaited a reckoning with the natural cleavage that persists between rules of independence and the customs of community. New York State, with a rich history of its own, borders New England and borrowed much of its ways. But the New Englander carried a kind of elitist self-confidence from the Atlantic into the hinterlands all the way to the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, and beyond. New York provided these eastern adventurers and entrepreneurs the trails, at first called the paths, called traces, a canal, and then roads to Buffalo and the Great Lakes beyond. See previous chapters on that. As recounted in the previous chapter, one of the first serious settlement projects in the frontier on the Ohio River, Marietta, was populated initially by an assortment of New Englanders. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut were among the first 13 U.S. colonies to become states. The 14th state was Vermont in 1791, after resolving border disputes with New York and distinguishing itself from New Hampshire. Oddly, Vermont even attempted to operate as its own separate republic, independent of both Britain and the Continental Congress. The territory of Maine had been a part of Massachusetts, but it was granted statehood much later, on March 15, 1820, as part of the Missouri Compromise. New Hampshire, founded in 1622, was named after Hampshire in England. When the Revolution first broke out, New Hampshire became a divided state. Many first settlements in this colony were those of fishermen living near the modern-day Portsmouth. The settlers of today's Massachusetts came in 1630. The origin of the name is disputed, but the idea of, quote, New England originated in reports of ship captains who delivered the first groups of seasick pilgrims and colonists. The Boston Latin School, founded in 1635, is regarded to be the oldest school in America. The Boston Massacre in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party in 1773 are historical markers that remain widely commemorated in the U.S. lexicon of broad political implications for the young country. The first settlers of Connecticut, around 1635, were originally Dutchmen erecting houses and businesses near modern-day Hartford. This region also absorbed some English Puritans from the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Pequot War bloodied the reputation of these folks, who battled and defeated many native inhabitants, selling captives into slavery. Approximately 700 Pequot Indians died in the Mystic Massacre along the Mystic River. The Mystic Seaport gradually emerged as a supplier of ships and whalers and fisheries to the commercial boom along the east coast of America and Canada. The Charles W. Morgan is the oldest American merchant ship afloat and the last surviving American wooden whale ship. Launched in 1841. And last but not least, or maybe least, Providence, renamed Rhode Island, was the smallest colony of England in America, founded in 1636. It was the first colony of England that declared independence and separation from English rule. Vermont today shares many characteristics with its western neighbor, upstate New York. Its shores on Lake Champlain are a natural boundary with the Adirondack Mountains and tangled forests west of its own rich farmlands and wilderness areas, including the Green Mountains extending into Massachusetts via the Berkshire Hills. The state is one of the nation's most rural. The Green Mountains, a backbone of Vermont, contain on the west the Lake Champlain. That lake is a massive water basin that today marks the border with the north section of the state of New York and its Adirondack Mountains. The Green Mountain Boys, with Ethan Allen, their flag bearer, intimidated the Yorkers, who were contesting the mountain lands east of Champlain early on, and then played a key local role in the battles with the British afterward in the Revolutionary War. During the War of Independence, extraordinarily stubborn Scottish settlers, mainly, among others, kept up the pressure on Loyalist troops that sought to penetrate the interior territory of New England and to secure full control of Champlain and river valleys snaking north to Canada and the St. Lawrence River and southward toward Albany and the greater Hudson Valley. In the Battle of Bennington, Vermont, Brigadier General John Stark and more than 1,000 men from New Hampshire, plus Green Mountain Boys Vermonters, defeated 2 detachments of General Burgoyne's British Army. The Loyalist forces included Brunswick Dragoons, Hessian artillery, and other German detachments, French Canadians, Native Americans, Loyalists, and British marksmen. Weapons and food stored in the area had been the draw for Burgoyne's army heading south toward Albany. The fight really occurred entirely on land that today belongs to New York State in Walloomsac Heights. Not long after this fight, the Burgoyne army moved on and was thoroughly defeated again in the Battle of Saratoga. In Bennington City, besides a battle monument, 2 other landmarks stand out for special comment. The most mysterious and even creepy structure along the roadway is the Walloomsac Inn, once abandoned but currently inhabited by ... perhaps Arlene Berry, relative of Walter Berry, who purchased the property in 1891. Originally dubbed Dewey's Tavern, the Walloomsac was built in 1771 by Elijah Dewey after signing a deed for an acre of land from Moses Robinson, the biggest landowner in Bennington. Here was one of several sites used by the legislature of the short-lived independent Republic of Vermont. Notables including Thomas Jefferson and James Madison lodged here as guests. Across the street from this tilting, creaking collection of boards is a classic example of federal architecture at the old First Church of Bennington. The white Congregationalist Temple to God purportedly may have been the first Protestant church in Vermont, its building style copied elsewhere throughout New England. The church congregation, organized in 1762, met in a pine meeting house raised in 1766. A rebuilt sanctuary seating up to 650 persons was completed in 1805. Robert Frost, the poet, is among the most notable inhabitants of, quote, Vermont's Sacred Acre Cemetery, which is located adjacent to the church.
Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold, her early leafs a flower, but only so an hour, then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sunk to grief, so dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay.
There are more than 80 covered bridges in Vermont. The state's largest city is Burlington, built on the northeast shore of Lake Champlain, north of Shelburne Bay. Nearby are the spectacular Shelburne Farms and the enormous Shelburne Museum of American Art and Culture. A homestead of that Green Mountain boy, Ethan Allen, is preserved on a lonely patch of land nearby. The Trapp Family Lodge is also located in central Vermont, in Stowe. Vermonters, notably, regard their lives to be a model of independence, democracy, and public rule. Faithful to the town meeting style of government, Vermonters and most New Englanders tout their adherence to their state's tradition of local direct democracy. But as Frenchman Alexis de Tocqueville jotted down in his travel notebooks in 1831, some citizens of the Republic, including New Englanders, harbored misgivings about certain democracy practices in the U.S. in the 19th century. Salmon Portland Chase, born in Cornish, New Hampshire in 1808, was the 6th Chief Justice of the U.S. from 1864 to 1873. He had earlier served as a judge, then the 23rd Governor of Ohio, was the state senator, and served as Secretary of the Treasury in the administration of Abraham Lincoln. He early on set up a law practice in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1830. Alexis met him a year later. Alexis recorded his interview with the young lawyer, Chase. De Tocqueville asked Chase whether the extensive franchise of universal suffrage at the time inevitably allows for people to often choose badly. According to Chase,
I am convinced that there is not a distinguished man in the United States who does not regret the very broad suffrage we have here only in New England, and especially Massachusetts, about which I can speak, because my family was originally from there. Are the people sufficiently educated and sufficiently in control of their passions, always to elect the most noteworthy men? Massachusetts is, in my view, the exception that proves the rule.
Chase suggested at the time that the nation had, quote, taken democracy here about as far as it can go. It has yielded some quite poor choices, especially in the cities.
For example, the last 4 congressmen elected in the county in which Cincinnati is located were absolutely unworthy of the honor.
Chase told the Frenchman. Alexis asked him in turn, but how did they gain their nominations? Chase responded,
by flattering everyone, as distinguished men will never do, by mingling with the dregs of the populace, by basically flattering the people's passions, by drinking with them. And the people don't just send such men to serve in the state legislature. There are quite a few in Congress. Yet, in spite of all this, the influence of talented men makes itself felt in our government.
Alexis asked another question. Quote, do you not think that it was dangerous for Ohio to allow the legislature to choose judges and then to limit their term to 5 to 7 years? Chase responded, quote,
yes, I do believe that was a dangerous measure in America. Judges are supposed to maintain balance among all parties, and their special role is to counter the enthusiasm and errors of democracy. If they are merely an emanation of democracy and dependent on it for their future, they cannot enjoy the necessary independence. In fact, Vermont goes much further in this direction than we do, because their judges are elected every year.
And so, an old debate about the fundamentals and meaning of democracy continues to this day in the United States.